Hi, Charlie Kosorik, Jack Bench Woodworking. A few months ago, I built this slab coffee table. And this video is intended to be an overview of the entire build construction of this table. I do have 4 other videos that I already did on this that are specific to how I flattened the top, how I constructed the base, how I carved the texture on the base, and the top has black stars inlaid in the surface, and I have a video on how I did the inlay. I'll briefly talk about all of those things in this video, but if you want more information about those specifics, there are, like I said, these 4 other videos that you can watch to get information on that. So, without any further ado, I'll get into it and show you how I did all those things. Okay, so after I lower the bench down to make it easier to reach, then I started working on the router jig to flatten the slab. The jig has 2 rails that clamp down onto the workbench, and the sled that holds the router rides over the top of those 2 rails. A paper template makes it easy to locate the holes for mounting the router into the bottom of the sled. I mounted a dust hood behind the router on the sled to help collect the chips. Once I secured the slab, then I was ready to go. Once the slab was flat, then I started working on the base. The first thing I did there was to make a plan view template of the base onto a 1/4-inch piece of plywood. Since I was doing a coopered construction, I also needed templates for the staves. The base consisted of 114 separate pieces, so it took a while to mill them up. The bottom of the base was pretty rough and uneven after I put it together, so I used another router jig to flatten it out. Actually, the outside of the base was even rougher than the bottom of it. I used an angle grinder to smooth everything out and to get the shape that I was looking for. After the shaping was done, I used Bondo to fill in any voids that happened to be there. This is a bit out of sequence here, but I used a small circular saw and a paint remover to texture the inside faces of the base. Before I started texturing the rest of the base, I painted the whole thing gray and added some general layout lines. I did all the rest of the texturing with a 2-inch angle grinder. And here's how they looked right after I was done texturing them. Painting the base was a lot of fun. First thing I did was put a wash coat of black on the inside faces and then wipe off the high points to give it some depth. Initially, I wanted a bronze finish. Started out by applying a brown base coat over the whole thing, and then I dry brushed some bronze paint over the top of that. When I was done, the base looked exactly the way I wanted it to. But when I set the slab on top of the base, there was a problem. Because the bronze had kind of a greenish tone to it, and the slab had kind of a reddish tone, and when I put the 2 together, it just looked terrible. So I put a thin base coat of the brown over the whole thing and started over again. If you want a good result, then use good quality paint. And I'll have a link in the description if you want to know more about these particular paints. I used a dry brushing technique to add the accent colors. So I had two different tones of copper color. One was more of a reddish colored copper, one was more of yellowish or gold colored copper. So I started out and I dry brushed a coat of the reddish colored copper onto the whole piece. I don't know if it shows in the picture here, but now it was too red and it actually looked unnatural. So then I dry brushed just the faintest coat of the gold over the top of the red to try and tone the red back a little bit. There were a lot of wormholes in the top of the slab, so I decided to inlay some black stars over those wormholes. There's a bit more to it than I can show you in this overview video, but I do have another video that's dedicated just to inlaying those stars, and of course there's a link to that video in the description below. I used a water-based grain filler on the top, and then I applied thin coats of polyurethane, sanding in between each coat. Of course, with the wipe-on finish, there were some imperfections and air bubbles and that sort of thing. And I sanded those all out. I wet sanded them with a really, really fine wet or dry sandpaper. Might have been 2000 grit, possibly higher. So here's a professional photo of the finished table, the beauty shot. I think it looks pretty good. Well, I hope you liked this video. I hope you enjoyed watching this. Like I said, I have specific videos that go into more detail on how I flattened the top, how I put the stars in the top, how I constructed the base, and another one on how I did the carving and texturing of the base. And of course, there are links to those videos in the description for this video. So anyway, and if you have any comments, questions, by all means, please leave those here for me to take a look at. I respond to all comments that people leave. I love reading them, so I appreciate that. And if you like this, please give me a thumbs up. That helps my channel. And thanks for watching.